This is Transformation Ground Control, your source for all things business, technology, strategy, and change. If you're growing your business, leading change within your organization, or undertaking any sort of operational or technology change initiative, this podcast is for you. This show covers what you need to know about digital transformation, organizational change, operational improvement, and business growth.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
And now, here's your host, Eric Kimberling.
Hello and welcome to Transformation Ground Control. My name is Eric Kimberling. I'm here with Paresa Noble. Paresa, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me. Happy to be here as always.
Yeah, glad to have you. Exciting show for you today. But before we get started, I don't know if you knew this or not, Paresa, but I have exciting news. Our podcast is now number one among all podcasts related to digital transformation that are also named after David Bowie songs.
Oh, really?
Yes. So that's just some exciting news I wanted to share as we get into I think this is our 7th episode here. And I haven't validated this data point, by the way, but I'm pretty sure among all podcasts about digital transformation named after David Bowie songs, we were probably number one.
Probably.
So, probably. So
I love it.
Welcome to this. Welcome to the show. We've got a great episode again today. I'm excited to have a couple of our guests here today. We're gonna have on the show Alison Moy, who's going to talk a little bit about women in technology. And Paresa is going to have a good discussion with her about some of the things she's seeing in the market. And then we also are going to have an interview with Wayne Holtham, who's our Vice President of Third Stage's Asia Pacific office in Australia. And he and I are actually going to have a conversation about the Queensland Health ERP failure that recently happened in Australia. Fascinating case study, just unpacking what went wrong, what some of the lessons are for organizations that are embarking on their own transformations. And so we'll have that great conversation with Wayne here later today. But before we get to that, we wanted to talk a bit about some of the conversations we've been having on social media, LinkedIn in particular. For those of you that follow Third Stage or myself on LinkedIn, you know we like to post questions and stir up discussion and controversy and that sort of thing on social media. And we recently asked some questions around change management and buy-in and alignment. Those are some of the things we've been covering and discussing on social media lately. And Paresa, you had some observations about what people are saying and what some of the feedback is that we're getting from some of our listeners.
Yeah, definitely. So you had 2 interesting posts that I wanted to just bring up. They started to go viral. So I thought, what a great conversation to bring onto the show. So I'll pose the question first, and I want to highlight a couple answers that we saw. And just kind of get some more context from you as well. So the first one, you posted, you love consulting because you're always learning something new. And you said the other day, a client said that resource constraints go away when you have buy-in. In other words, perhaps resources aren't as limited when people support and throw their weight behind a project. So when an ERP project team complains about not having enough resources, are they really saying that they just don't have enough resources for this project? Which, I mean, if you think about it, it would seem to be true. And one of the responses that stood out to me was from Wayne Sadin. And he said, buy-in from the CEO and other executives makes resources appear magically, just like that, right? So it's like, if you have the top, leaders in the company fully behind the project, what really could stop you? So I guess this prompted a question for me when it comes to OCM, organizational change management. It really starts with the leaders. I mean, it's going to be a top-down approach. It doesn't come from the bottom up, right? So I guess, was your client specifically talking about resource constraints taking a backseat when executives are not necessarily bought in, or were they referring to the whole organization and just like money and, all the different resources that go into it?
Yeah, so this particular client, and that's the beauty, like I mentioned in the post, the beauty of consulting is, most people hire us because we're the experts, but along the way, we're constantly learning from our clients and picking up new nuances and learning new things along the way. And this particular client was just talking about the organization in general, about how when there wasn't buy-in, or before they had the level of buy-in they have now, they felt the need or the pressure to sort of throw resources at that problem and put more people on it, or force more people to get engaged. But once they backed up and had more buy-in and got people more involved in some of the decision making and the planning and the execution of the project, then it sort of shifted to where people were excited about the project. They bought in, and suddenly you didn't have to throw resources at the problem of buy-in because people were already buying in. So I just thought that was just an interesting nuance. It makes total sense, but I hadn't ever thought of it in that way before.
Right. And I mean, if you think about it, if anybody has skin in the game, you're going to perform better, regardless of, if you're playing in a baseball game or you're going through a digital transformation. If your whole team is intrigued and is fully engaged and is doing what they can to get to the finish line, I mean, usually you're going to get to the finish line. So I think that's going to be interesting as we talk to Wayne about the Queensland Health challenges as well, but we'll get to that in a little bit. So that kind of took me to the next one, and this one really got a lot of engagement, which I thought was interesting. It's specifically around executive alignment, and we've talked a lot about executive alignment specifically. So your question was, what is the most common problem you see with executive alignment and support on ERP and digital transformation initiatives? There was there's a lot of discussion on this one, which I thought was interesting. I think the main theme I saw was executives are kind of looking for a quick fix. In some cases, not all cases, right, of course, but they're looking for that one system that can come in and fix all their problems. They go through the transformation and then they want to just kind of coast and, reap the benefits rather than doing system upkeep, et cetera. David Joe Armstrong also said, standing on the sidelines, watching, not leading, not participating, not actively supporting the change, which I think goes back to your first question. They're not necessarily bought in as they should be. So I guess, when you look at this, the people who are leading the charge, it really starts with them, right? I mean, if you think about it, could I pose the question that you are setting yourself up for failure if you don't have the first and most important step, which is executive alignment and executive buy-in?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's the source of most headwinds, or a lot of the headwinds that projects face, is that the executives either aren't aligned, or they're not on board, or they're not engaged enough. And that just that sort of trickles down to the rest of the organization when that happens, to where, if the executives aren't aligned, the chances are fairly high that the rest of the organization isn't aligned. Decision-making becomes a problem. There's a lot of infighting or uncertainty over what the direction of the company or the operational model or the organizational changes should be. And that just leads to a lot of delays, cost overruns, derailment of projects, all that stuff.
So it's interesting to kind of look at the root cause of it. It all comes back to, where's the leadership's head at? There was a lot of good comments about how executives will follow and believe what the software vendors are sharing, which kind of goes back to that expectations conversation, as well as one of the red flags of going down the road of an ERP failure. So I guess when you're looking for a magic pill in a software, according to Nathan Reese, he called it the magic pill of softwares that comes in and solves all your problems. I think, if you're looking for that and the software vendor positions it as such, I mean, it will cloud the whole project. So, I mean, when you look at system upkeep, let's kind of talk about that. I mean, yeah, it'll be the upfront work of inputting your data, getting the software up and running. But at a high level, what do companies need to keep in mind that is going to be kind of that ongoing work of system upkeep and maintenance to make sure that their new software, whatever that may be, is performing at an optimal capacity?
Yeah. So the biggest thing that organizations need to do is just to make sure that as their business evolves and changes and grows, and as the technology evolves and changes and grows over time, you have to make sure those two things stay in sync, because where you are today or where you are on day one of go live, even assuming you've implemented perfectly, you've met all your business needs and requirements, things are going to change over time. And direction you go as an organization and the direction that the software vendor does with its, especially with its automatic upgrades through the cloud, in most cases for most ERP vendors, you're going to have changes to the software that either aren't aligned with the way you're going, or it's just a change to where people need to be trained and need to become more comfortable with the way that that's shifting. So that's probably the biggest thing, is just making sure that you don't view go live as the end of the project. You have this continuous improvement cycle throughout, to where you're constantly keeping your technology and your business and your organization, all three of those things, aligned throughout time. That
makes sense, having harmony across the board.
Yeah.
And Sam Graham also, he shared a story which I thought was interesting. He was speaking with a production director at a trailer manufacturing company. He said, you've probably heard of it, so it's probably a more well-known brand. And they had an ERP system, but they weren't really using it. And instead, he was proudly showing his spreadsheets of how they keep track of all their orders, all their, trailer production, etc. And he said, I looked at them and said, here's an order that is due next week and is not scheduled to be made. Here's an order that's due to be completed, but it's not scheduled to even be started. Here's an order for 50 trailers that you've scheduled to be made in 6 batches of 10. So just those inefficiencies are like mind blowing, right? I mean, these guys are leaving so much on the table, and he said they're still in business, but they haven't made a profit after several years. So it's really realizing the benefits that an ERP system can do for you. And if you've already implemented it and you're not optimizing what you have in front of you, it's just a huge lost opportunity for businesses, it sounds like.
Yeah, that's very true. And it's amazing to me how often organizations focus so myopically on how much is this transformation going to cost me now? So in other words, how do I minimize or optimize the cost and time it takes me to put in this new technology and all these changes that come along with it? But they don't think about what the impact of the organization is longer term. So I could save a bunch of money and implement an ERP system or a business technology as quickly as any client possibly could want, or a team could, I should say. But that doesn't mean it's going to go well. It doesn't mean it's going to look pretty on the other side. It doesn't mean it's not going to cost you a ton of money trying to fix all the problems that are caused by implementing faster and cheaper than you might otherwise want to. So I think really looking at the full picture of not just what are you spending today, how much time and resources are you spending today to implement new changes, but longer term, what is that impact going to look like? And ideally, you want to be focused on the business value, like you and Sam are talking about here, which is how do we get, not just not screw things up, but how do we make things better? And so many companies just try not to screw things up. It's such a low bar that they set. When in reality, the technology, all these transformations that people go through, the intent is to make our business better and to be more profitable and effective and all that good stuff. But for whatever reason, organizations tend to lose sight of that oftentimes when they go through these transformations.
Interesting. It's like, what are you looking at? I remember hearing a study of if you're driving and you're looking at a tree, you're going to probably veer toward the tree. So if your eye's not on the right target, you're probably not going to hit the target. So
yeah, that's a great analogy. I might start using that.
Go for it. Yeah. I mean, and this production director, I mean, he's one of the top guys. He's leading the charge and he's still stuck in his spreadsheets. Sounds like some a good case of the resistance going from top-down approach. That's why they're in the position they're in. So I feel like that plays into our, kind of looking into what happened with Queensland Health. I'm so curious.
Yeah. There's a lot of really interesting things to talk about there. And then the interesting part of the failure of Queensland Health, as we'll talk about here in a minute, is a lot of it does stem from lack of alignment at the top, lack of organizational change management, or a focus on the people aspects of change. And you use the term root cause, and what are the root causes of why projects fail? It's easy to get caught up in things like, our project management wasn't very good. We didn't have a good project manager. Our project plan wasn't good, or we over customized the software. Those are all very real problems, but when you really peel back the onion and dig in, you usually find out that it's not just because people wanted to customize or because you just had a bad project manager. Chances are there's something underneath that, those are just symptoms of a deeper problem. So that's very true for a lot of transformations, and certainly for Queensland Health, as we'll talk about here in our case study here in a few minutes. So we're going to take a quick break. Thanks for bringing up some of these discussion points. These are really interesting points, and By the way, for those of you that don't already follow us on LinkedIn, be sure to follow Third Stage Consulting on LinkedIn to join in these conversations. You can also follow me, Eric Kimberling, on LinkedIn as well. We're also out on Facebook and Twitter, but LinkedIn is where we would arguably do most of the engaging that we do in social media. So I encourage you to follow us there. We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we're going to bring on Wayne Holtham to talk about the Queensland Health enterprise software debacle down under in Australia. And we'll get his insights, and we'll talk about some of the lessons from that failure in that case study here. When we come back, you're listening to Transformation Ground Control. We'll be right back.
You're sitting all alone, are you okay?
If you are aiming for transformation success, turn to Third Stage Consulting Group. Third Stage's independent and technology agnostic consulting team helps clients define their digital strategies, define their roadmaps, and manage their transformations. With offices in the US, Europe, and Australia, our team helps the world's most forward-thinking organizations through their transformation pitfalls and risks. If you are embarking on a digital transformation or business change initiative, contact Third Stage Consulting to see how we can help you reach the third stage of transformation success. Learn more about us and download independent reports, videos, and other best practices at thirdstage-consulting.com.
Hello, and welcome back to Transformation Ground Control. You can find us live on YouTube every Wednesday at 10 a.m. Eastern Time in the U.S., 3 p.m. London, or 11 p.m. Hong Kong time. Be sure to subscribe to us on Apple, Google, Spotify, Pandora, wherever you listen to podcasts. Or obviously, like I said, you can also watch us on YouTube. I'm excited to have our next guest on the show. This is Wayne Holtham. He is the Vice President of Third Stage's Asia Pacific office based out of Brisbane, Australia. And this is a relatively new branch that we set up in 2020 during the pandemic. We established or shortly after the pandemic, we established the presence in Australia and have built up a good client base there. Fortunately or unfortunately, depending on how you look at it, Queensland Health is not a client of ours. However, they recently went through a pretty big digital and business transformation that did not go so well. And we're going to talk a little bit more. Wayne will explain a little bit more about who Queensland Health is and the size and scope and complexity of their organization and transformation. But one thing to note that's really interesting about these public organizations like Queensland Health is whenever they have a failure like this, a lot of times they're very transparent about putting out postmortems and reports about what happened and sort of analyzing the results of the transformation. So in a lot of ways, it makes it easy to analyze and dissect what went wrong. And back to your point in the last segment, Paresa, really digging into the root causes of what drove some of those symptoms that everyone sort of points their fingers at. And that's exactly what we want to do here with Wayne is analyze based on public record and information we have on the Queensland Health situation, is talk about what went wrong and, more importantly, what are some of the lessons that you can take away as an organization. So I'm excited to have Wayne on the show. Wayne, thanks for being here today.
Thanks, Eric. It's good to be back again.
Yeah, thanks for being here. And you're in Australia. You're close to the topic at hand here today, which is Queensland Health. They recently had a pretty significant ERP failure that's been in the news, even here in the United States. I imagine it's probably even bigger news in your part of the world, given that you're right there and you're actually in the immediate region where Queensland Health is based. And just to give some real quick context, and then I'm going to ask you a bunch of questions about this as a follow-up, just so we can maybe get some lessons and pull some lessons learned out of this whole ERP failure. But Queensland Health, from what I understand, has 16 hospitals. From what I understand, they are basically all the public hospitals in the Queensland region within Australia are owned by Queensland Health. They have roughly 30,000 employees, from what I understand. And the gist of what this digital transformation was for them that we're going to talk about here today is they were moving from SAP, a legacy version of SAP. I'm not sure if it was ECC or R3 or what it was, but it was a legacy version of SAP, and they were migrating to SAP S/4HANA, and they ran into trouble and had a failure. Before I kind of highlight some of the bottom line results of their failure. Is there anything I missed in terms of just what Queensland Health is, or anything I've missed just being a local resident there in Australia?
Now, Queensland Health is probably, they manage all of the health hospitals, as well as all of the procurement and supply requirements that those hospitals have across the Queensland region for everything, even some of the support things like mental health and those areas. So it's a really a very integrated and complex type operation that actually Queensland Health operates. Some are diversified, but Queensland Health is actually quite centralised. But they, have all of the feed-in hospitals that leverage that central buying power.
Got it. Yeah, and is it pretty well known then? I mean, people that live in Brisbane and other parts of Queensland, they understand or they know what Queensland Health is. It's pretty well known, I assume.
Oh yeah. There's a lot of reliance, and it's quite a public facing government entity. They've had their fair share of issues over the past. They had a payroll one a few years ago where they couldn't pay people, so for about 6 weeks, a similar type upgrade of technology. So they've been, it's always one of those areas in Queensland, or Australia at least, where Queensland Health has probably been in the public eye because of some of the challenges they've had when trying to upgrade.
Yeah, that's interesting. It's always interesting when you find that it's not the first time they've failed or struggled with an initiative like that. So you do have to wonder, to some degree, is it how much of it is a technology issue versus maybe more of an organizational or cultural or political, internal politic type of issue? And that's what we'll dive into here today a bit more.
Yeah.
So I'll just hit some of the highlights from the results of the Queensland Health ERP debacle. What's interesting about this case, and you usually don't get this with publicly reported failures, is that there was an audit that was conducted of the project to figure out what went wrong and what do they need to do to improve going forward. And that audit's publicly available. And you and I have both read the pretty detailed document that outlines some of the lessons learned. But I pulled just a handful of headline results kind of from what was the outcome of the implementation after they went live. And just some of the things that came out of it was, first of all, they were clear in the audit report that there wasn't an adverse impact to healthcare. So they wanted to make it clear that even though this project failed, they were still able to take care of their patients and their customers. But when you peel back the onion a bit more, peel back and look underneath the hood, you see that there were some other problems. First of all, the project was delayed by about 10 months. I don't remember what the original timeline was. I think it was 2 years or somewhere around there. And then they delayed it by about 10 months. They had about $500,000 Australian dollars of invoices that were late, that they were just behind on processing because the processes were broken, and some other issues that we'll get to here in a second, which then also led them to have trouble with the whole budgeting process because they didn't really fully understand or have visibility into how much money was outstanding to be owed to vendors. So that complicated their budgeting process, which had a trickle-down effect. They had about 17,000 service desk requests at the time of go live, or at least in the days and weeks following go live, which was a massive amount of service desks hitting their IT help desk. The costs were about 30% more than expected. They had about 500,000, 482,000 obsolete invoices. So invoices that they had to clean out of the system because they just weren't relevant, or I'm not sure if they were duplicates or inaccurate or what, but they had to go clean up a lot of the data after the fact. 14 of the 16 hospitals stated that workflows didn't operate as expected. So overwhelming majority of the hospitals within Queensland Health said that the processes weren't working the way they wanted it to. Whether or not that was a technical issue, business process issue, organizational change issue, that's something we'll dive into here in a second. And then finally, the last of the headlines from this failure is that they spent about 3.1 million Australian dollars after go live just trying to clean up and fix some of what went wrong during go live. So that further added to the total cost of the implementation. So I guess just to start, you kind of lay that as the background or the context of what went wrong with this implementation, this failure. Just based on some of those symptoms of those end results and some of the things that you saw in the audit report that they released, What do you think some of the key root causes of failure were, just based on what we do know about it?
Yeah, it's the audit report's been really was quite detailed, really, in how it looked at those, and it seems like that there wasn't an understanding of or ownership of the project. I think there was that part of it seemed to be one of those areas where they constantly had changing directors who were responsible. They really sort of were working centrally, but probably not engaging with all of those hospitals that were reliant on the solution being effective. And the workflow side of things there is if that's not clear, then you start to lose your ability to be able to, in this case, show demand of what you require in the supply chain space, and then be able to process that. And so they were key areas. Other areas you could see where people didn't know how to use the system. They weren't trained to use the system, and even if they were trained, they didn't know what process they had to use. And so really quite scary stuff when you think that you've got an organization that is 30,000 people that are going live, and in front of them they don't know what they need to do when they push the button, or what they have to do on the screen. So that some really big failings when it comes to sort of taking what is a technology solution and taking it to the business for the business to be able to use. And I think that's a key the key areas. And I suppose the last piece is it didn't seem like they had the understanding of how they could actually see what they were doing. So then you can't see what's going wrong. So the reporting aspect was I suppose the last piece, where that's where you continue to keep working and finding that you've got a lot of redundant information in there that's not being actioned. And that's a big area. One of the challenges that we did here was that they migrated information. They didn't have that rule of what's active and what's not active, and so that when the system migrated all of that data in, all of those invoices, all those vendor invoices, some of those were actually inactive from the old system, but no one had really tested and checked that information was actually valid and still active. And so that confused the issue a lot more as well.
Yeah. I want to come back to a lot of those points you just made, maybe unpack those a little bit more. But just hearing you talk about this and kind of building on the context setting I gave at the beginning, it's kind of scary to think about something like a hospital chain that's that important to the public health of Queensland. And even though they say that this didn't affect their ability to take care of patients and customers, you still have to wonder, could they have done better? And it's just scary to think about how an ERP project or an ERP failure, more specifically, could have a harmful impact on more than just a business. It can affect people's lives too. So it's
exactly right. And
example.
And it was interesting that the way that many of the hospitals mitigated, they actually purchased directly instead of through the central system. So that had, I suppose that's where they were able to not necessarily overcome, but to address the shortfalls that were there. And obviously some pretty good vendors that allowed them to actually, continue supply without necessarily the stop of not payment. So so that's what helped it through. But I think it was more of a good fortune than a real something you could say, well, we didn't impact. I think it was because a lot of other people helped out to make that or reduce that impact.
Yeah, and most organizations don't have the luxury of 30,000 employees and the resources to say, hey, we're going to invest in the centralized purchasing to kind of shore up the difficulties we might be having there. For the average small and mid-sized company, that's not really an option. If it affects your core operations, there's no getting around that for most companies.
No, exactly right. And and hospitals need to have constantly this flow of materials, and you sort of think everything from their medications to their PPE to their even the operations of cleaning and all of those sort of things that go on are all managed through that central system. So you can see it's a real lifeline for many of these hospitals, and it is surprising that they probably didn't feel as much of the effect as one would imagine.
Yeah, absolutely. And it, especially because the go live happened, if I remember correctly, was late or in the second half of 2019. So just a few months before COVID happened and the health impact that had on the whole world. So it was a pretty risky time for them to experience this sort of failure. Obviously they didn't know, and no one knew that COVID was going to happen just a few months later, but that's a scary time to be thinking about an ERP failure if you're a hospital.
Oh, exactly right. And, there's being a government entity, there's always that political pressure of trying to contain costs and trying to obviously manage the rising cost of health. Even before the pandemic probably changed that, and the fact that people now view health as a bit more of a primary need than, the politicians believe it's managing the costs. And so they all were managing that side of it as well, because there was a pressure on reducing the I suppose the costs within the hospital ecosystem as such.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I want to come back to a few things you mentioned here and dive into a little bit more. One of the things you talked about was the overall accountability and governance of the project in general. And in the report, in the audit report that you and I both reviewed, they talked about how there were a number of different reorganizations or restructuring of who was accountable and responsible for the project. What are some of your observations about that and how you think that might have affected the overall success or failure of this project?
Yeah, it's interesting the change of who was responsible, and and the ongoing changing of who would make the decisions to actually determine what the system would look like, what the solution would look like. And it looks like that a lot of those decisions were not necessarily followed through because of that breaking the chain of ownership. There wasn't a clear steering committee by the look of it. It was more just a vendor working with a director, and that sort of, and when they constantly change, all of a sudden many of the decisions that are probably open decisions still either remain open, that don't actually get picked up and acted upon. And in this case here, that's what it seems like, is that they had this series of change of responsibility, and not necessarily the conduit that actually continued what was happening, because the ERP is quite a long drawn out development of a solution, and it needs continuity to actually make that to make the solution effective at the end of the day. And by having those constant changes there, you lose that consistency of decision, consistency of closeout of any of the issues that might happen. And also you change focus slightly, because everyone, when you change ownership, someone has a different driver of what they're actually looking for. So all of a sudden the solution that started changes out to be something different, and that's not always a good outcome.
Yeah, absolutely. It almost sounded like it was almost a bit of hot potato. Who's gonna take this? Who wants to ownership of this project? And it didn't seem like there's a lot of strategic deliberation around, hey, this is a very strategic project and we want our best executives or our most influential executives on this. It seems like later in the project, they were sort of scrambling to figure out who is best suited to streamline this and really get the project on track.
Yeah, and it's an interesting scenario, because one of the observations that I think that comes out in this is that they didn't really have an understanding of what the technology program they were putting in place. And so they're maybe good at delivering health outcomes, but it was more like, let's outsource our problem and get someone to deliver this for us, and we'll just make the decisions we need to make along the line as we move forward. And I think that seems to be one of those areas that is probably the basis of where things started to go wrong, in the sense that people were just seeing that someone else was fixing the problems, not necessarily making the decisions for the better good of Queensland Health, and obviously the outcomes that they were looking to achieve. And that's a really organizations bring in advisors and all those sort of things, but at the end of the day they still own the responsibility of delivering a result. And I think that was probably a little bit hazy for Queensland Health in this instance, with all those changes as such.
Yeah, and by the time you get to firefighting mode, that it's not that it's too late. It's just you're not thinking strategically at that point. You're not thinking about what's best for Queensland Health or how's this strategically going to enable us to take better care of our patients and our customers. It becomes more, how can we stop the bleeding? How can we settle things down and just get things to where we could just go live? And those are two subtle but very different mindsets that can be difficult to overcome if you get to the point where you're firefighting.
Exactly right, because one is tactical. So how do I actually implement a tactical solution that will get me out of the instant situation I'm in, as against the strategic? What's our long-term view? How are we going to address this over the longer term to get a result? And you're exactly right in the sense that they went from being the strategic, I suppose from the outset, is if we go to a S4, we are building our future to be more efficient, more effective. That's the strategy that probably kicked it all off or won the business case. But then after that, as things went wrong, these tactical things of how do we address this? What do we do immediately without considering the bigger picture that's sitting around it?
Right. Yeah. So shifting gears a little bit, just kind of continuing down the track of some of those themes you mentioned in your first response. One of the things that we both observed in that report, the audit report, was that 14 of the 16 hospitals reported during this audit that they did after the fact. And I can't remember who did the audit, by the way. I wasn't 100% clear if that was a government agency that performed that.
It's the Queensland Audit Office, and every large project now that happens in Queensland, it now gets audited by an independent office. And it was actually started as a result of the previous Queensland Health payroll failure that happened. And so they said, well, we need to be able to have oversight of this so we can actually learn and get better. And so that's where these audits come from.
Okay. That's good to know. I did not know that. And it's a bit different. I guess there's similarities to that in the United States, but that's good to know. So this is sort of I guess you call it an official independent source that had come up with some of these findings or observed some of these things. And one of the things that we saw in that report was that 14 of the 16 hospitals had reported that their business processes and workflows did not operate the way they expected. So, this is something I know you and I have both seen with clients and other implementations we've been involved with over the years. But what do you think is behind that? Is that an issue of, the technology wasn't configured right, people weren't trained well, business processes weren't well defined, all of the above, none of the above? What do you think was behind that?
I think it was all of the above. And I think probably the first starting point is understanding the differences between those different hospitals. And so, and that's always a challenge, because when you're trying to actually work with a number of different entities that on the higher level, on your level 4, they actually probably all operate the same. But when you actually get down to how we actually operate, that I think was overlooked. And so when process design was put in place, it was probably built to say, well, here's how we're going to operate, without considering that they do operate subtly differently. And then when you start to overlay the different roles that organizations within different hospitals might have, if you apply the process with the person who's doing the role, the workflow doesn't actually match up. And so all of a sudden you can see where there's that disconnect happening, because they're looking at it from a very high level. But when people actually have to physically go and do the role, it's not how they do it, and that wasn't considered. And so and then obviously the training that happened, I think I read in there that people started to go to training and felt that it was of no value, so they didn't continue, and so they had very low engagement from a training perspective. So that then makes it even worse, because people are saying, well, I don't even understand what you're telling me, it doesn't match what we do, I'm not going to go to training, but I'm still going to deploy. And so you can see how the comedy of errors just continues to roll on.
Yeah. And you have a few interesting points there. And one example that comes to mind with that we saw in the report, in the audit report, was that something as simple and as minute that seems like a pretty easy thing to figure out, but it can cause a big disruption, was that their units of measure that they converted to in the new system were different than what they were used to. So they gave the example of they were used to ordering a box of 100 gloves, so the unit was 1 because it was 1 box of 100. But in the new system, 1 meant 1 glove. It didn't mean a box of 100. So they were going out and ordering a glove at a time instead of a box at a time. So they didn't know what they were ordering, and then they ended up having inventory shortages. So I thought that was a really interesting example of how just something as simple as that, something you overlook in training, or you didn't think it through during the business process design or whatever the case may be, that can create some pretty significant disruptions for companies that are organizations going through this.
Yeah, and to me, it's a symptom of organizations that don't engage the business to actually do those checks that are things that are happening. So a business analyst has probably gone in and looked at, okay, we've got these supply lines, these supply items, and never considered, because they're not in the operation, they don't actually run a hospital, they just come in from the outside, they've got a specialist skill set. And so it wouldn't occur to a business analyst that potentially that you buy a box as against you buy a set of gloves. And so that's where it's almost like that outsourcing we talked about of the problem. It's not engaging the business to actually do those sanity checks to say, hang on, that's not how we operate, sort of thing. And so and that's where that business engagement really is, change management, all of those areas become really, really important, because we've built something in isolation and it looks great, but when we go to deploy it, it's not actually suit our business. And
Right.
That's essentially what they ended up with.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's also a good reminder for all of us, whether we're implementing SAP or any other ERP or enterprise technology, is that when you're using a commercial off-the-shelf system, especially if it's a big ERP system that's meant to do a bit of everything, and if you're a multinational company or a company that has multiple sites and different ways of operating, to your point earlier, the system simply can't be everything to everyone. It's not going to be able to adapt to each individual differentiation in how the business processes would work, nor might you may not want it to. You may want to centralize and standardize your processes a bit better. But I think this 14 of 16 metric, 14 of the 16 hospitals, they're reporting that the workflows didn't work the way they intended. It's a good eye opener, or a reminder that ERP systems require either you to change the software to fit the processes, or you change the processes to fit the software, but you have to be real deliberate and make sure you figure that out before you go live.
Oh, exactly right. And if you're going to change your processes to suit the software, you need to understand what the flow and effect of that is, or if you go the other way, where you actually change your software to suit the processes, which is probably where that's probably where Queensland Health would have come from if they had ECC in the past, heavily customized to suit their own operations. And then all of a sudden we go to something which is more centralized, more standardized. And so, which we believe is configurable. But when we understand what configurable means, it means that it's configurable within a certain parameter. So of central way of doing things, not configurable for many, many different ways of doing things. And I think that's the disconnect that many have when they try and interpret what does configurable mean. It means that, yes, we can make it do many things, but we can't make it do separate individual things for every different entity, because we've got a centralized approach we're rolling out. And interpreting that for many organizations is a hard thing, because they go, oh, it's configurable, you'll be able to make it do what I want it to do, because that's what I had before.
Yeah. How hard can it be?
Yeah, that's right.
Right. Well, that's good. Well, we're going to take a quick break here. I'm here with Wayne Holtham, Vice President of Asia Pacific, the Third Stage office. I'm the CEO of Third Stage. My name's Eric Kimberling, and we'll be right back.
If you are involved in any sort of digital transformation or business change initiative, you will want to download the 2021 Digital Transformation Report. With its comprehensive overview of business and technology trends and best practices, this report is a must-have guide for any transformation project or executive team. Download this free report by visiting Third Stage Consulting at thirdstage-consulting.com. You can also visit our website to learn more about us, or download independent reports, videos, and other best practices. Again, visit thirdstage-consulting.com today to learn how to take your transformation to the third stage of success.
here with Wayne Holtham, who is the Vice President of Third Stage Asia Pacific, based out of Brisbane, Australia. And we are here talking about the ERP failure at Queensland Health. And more specifically, it was an SAP S4HANA implementation failure. So Wayne, right before the break, we were talking about this whole concept of business processes and business process breakdowns or misunderstandings or combination of both. And one of the things that came out of the implementation, in addition to that, and some of the other things we've talked about, was that there was this whole concept, which I found really interesting, given that this was S4HANA we were talking about. And S4HANA, by the way, for those that don't know, is pretty well regarded in terms of its database architecture. It's sort of a innovative database architecture with the HANA platform, which was SAP's attempt to create a database on their own that wasn't dependent on Oracle's databases, and it has the real-time memory. It's supposed to be faster performing, better at analytics, and some of the quantitative business intelligence side of things. But in this case, it was reported in this audit report that after go live, they ended up having to implement some sort of third-party reporting tool that was using SAP's data, but they thought they needed this third-party reporting tool to get the data and the analytics they needed out of the system. Have you found this to be common in S4HANA implementations, or do you think this was a deeper underlying technical or user organizational changes here? Or what do you think that might have caused that?
No, I in the most experiences where I've seen this in reporting is the fact that S4 is known for its native analytics and reporting capability. And you have Fiori and you have the S4 HANA database. You can pull out information in real time. The challenge you have is if you actually don't have the information available to you, what are you pulling out? And I think that's the challenge. The first challenge they had. So when we talk about those migrated data or the migrated invoices that were incorrect, what they're seeing wasn't actually telling them what they needed to see. And the other part was the ability to process. So when you have S4 HANA, you actually, they went to a cloud type operation, and so it requires a lot of processing power to be able to drive that. And when they originally spec'd it, they didn't realize how many people would be using the system. And so that overloaded the amount of provisioning they put in place for the system as such, which meant that they had to then think, well, how can we get information out of the system? Maybe we go to a different reporting mechanism, but really it was just masking the fact that they didn't have good data, and they didn't actually have enough processing power to actually draw that data out. So it's one of those people overlook in S4 is that its reporting is superior if you have everything else underneath it working well. So your infrastructure landscape is supportive of what your actual application is looking to achieve, and they didn't get that right. And that's one of those areas that they really struggled on, to be able to get the information out to actually identify we've got a problem.
Yeah, that's really interesting, and it's a good reminder. Again, thinking of the lessons learned here, it's a good reminder that how important it is to not only look at the business process and the functionality of the software, but also the infrastructure, and making sure you've got the right infrastructure and architecture in place to be able to support what it is you're trying to accomplish.
Oh, exactly right. And one of the areas that I see overlooked often is this, we're putting in S4 because we want superior information back from our system so we can make better decisions. But reporting always seems to be left till last. And that's the thing that actually gives us the early signs, gives us the early warning, gives people the insight to be able to go and do what they are there to do in their job. And that was, just by that last stage of reporting effort that was put in, was really saying, hang on, we don't have the reporting information we need to actually understand what's happening here. Whereas that should have been designed at the beginning. And so that's almost like an acceptance criteria of what you're actually building a solution to achieve. And that just is one of those areas that I think S4 is sold on, but it's not necessarily what people get it delivered upon. That should be front and center of what they're actually looking to achieve, in my view, along with having engaged people who are understanding of what their role is, and they've been, they understand what the processes are they need to do. But the reporting piece is what tells them along the way how they're going, or what they're doing, or why they should be doing what they're doing, sort of thing.
Yeah, at that point, I mean, if you can't get data out of the system, and either because the reporting isn't the way you need it to be or you want it to be, or back to the example of the what was it, 500,000, about 480,000 invoices that they had to clean up in the system. I mean, if you could build a perfect system, have the perfect workflows within the system, and even if it's working perfectly when you go live, but you can't get data out of the system, in some ways it doesn't matter that you've done all that work to get things working the way it is if you can't have the visibility and the transparency into what's happening with your operations.
Oh, and that's exactly right. And if you look at why most people look to move to a new ERP, one of the driving forces, or one of the requirements that comes out, is we're going to get a better level of information, which means we're going to get better reporting out of it. And in most cases, that's never the thing that's considered as the most important thing, because if you work from that point, everything else starts to, your workflows happen because you need to be able to get information. So those workflows need to be consistent and accurate. Your processes need to be able to support those, so you can actually see what's actually happening. And so reporting should be the piece that actually they start with and say, okay, how would we get reporting with our processes? How would we get, our workflows going to deliver us the reporting requirements we're looking for, and which is information for us to know how our business is performing. And that doesn't seem to be the case. So it wasn't the case in this instance anyway.
Yeah, absolutely. And along those same lines too, there's a couple other examples that are semi-related to this whole reporting issue. One was the performance time of the system. So again, S/4HANA and the way the architecture is built is it's meant to be a faster, more responsive and faster processing type of ERP system, especially for larger organizations with extremely high volumes of transactional data. But in this case, Queensland Health reported that they were having very slow response times, and the users were getting frustrated. I think they had to work around the system, or they felt like they had to work around the system in many cases. Is that something you've seen, or is that, I think you've sort of touched on that in the previous thread, but what are your thoughts there?
Well, it's interesting you say that, because with probably where Queensland Health came from, they would have had the ECC, where they would have had all individual on-premise set up to a certain size to manage what their requirements were. And so when they actually went live with this one, they actually went to a SAP cloud option, and people didn't really understand the amount of extra processing power required to actually work a centralized system as against a whole lot of different individual systems. And so they didn't sort of account for how many people would be using it. And I think that's where that processing power comes from, because HANA is definitely faster in what it does and how it actually retrieves information. But if you still don't have enough processing power, its speed doesn't help, and that's the challenge they had. They had, I think it was just in one area. This was a different article that I'd read, was that they'd increased their reliance of processing by I think it was 60%, which is quite alarming. So for what they had spec'd it to be and to what they needed, there was a 60% gap, and that's that's a significant issue when you're trying to actually have everybody going live at the one time, sort of thing.
Yeah, absolutely. So another area that's sort of it's technical in nature in terms of infrastructure and the way the software is set up, but this is also part, I would say, user error or more of an organizational issue, was the whole idea of security. And they talked about how in the audit report, and paraphrasing obviously, but there's a section in there that talks about how they couldn't rely on the financial results that were reported in the system just because they didn't have the right security controls in place as far as who could make entries in the, I don't know if they were talking about the GL or if there was other, POs and payments to vendors or what it was, but they're making a general statement that there was issues with the security and controls. And that seems to be an area with these big implementations where, back to that theme we were talking about with the performance of the system and reporting, it's like you spend, say, 80 or 90% of your time and effort on just getting the core working, and you have trouble getting that 80 or 90% done, but then you fail to get that last little 10% that's going to add the most value, and things like reporting and performance. And then here, also with security tends to be, when you talk about like user profiles and who can do what in the system and what roles and responsibilities are going to be, so often that's an afterthought, and it can create huge problems, even if the system's working perfectly. If you go into the system and you can't do your job not because the system doesn't work, but because you don't have the right security profile, that has a huge impact. But so many companies just overlook that, or they just wait till, right before go live or even after go live to figure all that stuff out. But what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, it's interesting you say it, because what happens is it is very complex having security roles. When you look at S4, Fiori is it's a task based. So when you actually click on a tile, you're actually going, what is the task I'm going to do? And because SAP is quite, you can create, you can change, you can approve, you can delete. So that's where the security piece comes in. So you don't want the one person being able to create something, change something, and approve something, because you can have road buying, you can have people changing accounts, GL accounts, actually buying things outside for themselves, not necessarily for Queensland Health. So that security piece is there. And what it looks like they've done here is they've taken the approach where they've still left they've not considered those lower level roles within the security framework. So the security framework gives you some authorizations and access levels. And if you are too tight on those, you can stop your business from actually doing what it needs to do. But if you're too loose on those, people can go and do whatever they want to be able to do. And so it's a fine line of managing, building roles that actually suit what it is. And the Activate methodology only looks at your higher level processes, and those roles fall out of that. They don't actually have those lower level where, I've got someone who's in change, I've got someone who's in approve, I've got someone who's a master data updater, but they all shouldn't be the same person. And so often organizations, just to go live, they will have the much, much higher level, and that reduces that ability to have security across it. And Queensland Health, interestingly enough, there was I don't know if you saw it in America, but only a couple of years prior to putting in the S4, they had a worker who siphoned off $17 million worth of funds buying, Gucci handbags and those sort of things, a unit in central Brisbane, because he had so much access available to him, he could actually buy, approve, and then hide the evidence sort of thing. And so it's surprising that their security model wasn't stronger, because they'd already come off of a very publicized breach of security in the past. So.
That's interesting. That's really interesting. I hadn't heard of an example that broad, with a security breach like that. But a lot of people don't think about that. They just think, I think when a lot of people think of security, they think outside hackers or, some nefarious bad actor on the outside. They don't necessarily think about just your own employees, even if they're not ill-willed. They not having the right security setup can have a lot of implications.
Oh, it can. Yes, that's right. And it makes it worse you just imagine if they haven't been trained and they don't understand some of the other things that you're actually doing from a financial perspective. So if they have the ability to go and change accounts, change general ledgers, or change cost allocations and those sort of things, what damage are they actually doing, which they don't really understand because they just haven't been trained. So, and that's the other part of, I think, the debacle that Queensland Health had, was they had people in there going, well, how do I get rid of this out of the system? I'll just delete it, and there's a flow-on effect for that. So that's some of those challenges that I think they refer to.
Yeah.
If you are aiming for transformation success, turn to Third Stage Consulting Group. Third Stage's independent and technology agnostic consulting team helps clients define their digital strategies, define their roadmaps, and manage their transformations. With offices in the US, Europe, and Australia, our team helps the world's most forward-thinking organizations through their transformation pitfalls and risks. If you are embarking on a digital transformation or business change initiative, contact Third Stage Consulting to see how we can help you reach the third stage of transformation success. Learn more about us and download independent reports, videos, and other best practices at thirdstageconsulting.com.
So fast forwarding a bit, then we get close to the go live, and we've talked about a lot of the stuff that led up to the go live and some of the decisions and potential decisions they made that may have contributed to some of the challenges. But then we get close to go live, and there is a what did they call it? They called it an outside assurance review that happened just a few weeks or a couple months before the planned go live. And I found this really interesting because it was pretty ambiguous to me when I read this, but they said that the status of the or the overall summary status of the outside assurance review that they did of the project to basically assess whether or not they're ready to go live. It's sort of a go, no go type of assessment from what I understand, but they said it was amber/green, which to me is, what does that mean? I don't know what that, I couldn't tell you if that's good or bad, but sounds like a bit of both. But what they identified in that review were I guess 12 major risks or 12 risks that need to be addressed, and they addressed or closed out 7 of those risks prior to go live, but there were still 5 outstanding risks that they were still trying to mitigate as they went live. What are your thoughts here? Is this just the way SAP and ERP projects are? Should they have changed course? What are your thoughts?
I think one of the areas when it comes to getting an outside assessor to come in and assess the readiness of a project to go live is what's the basis that they're actually assessing. And so if you can't see that all the deliverables have been met in completeness, or what the effect of that gap of completeness might actually be, then that creates that ambiguity. So many times people go, oh well, it's green, or it's amber, but it's almost green, so that would be okay. But it's then saying, well, what is the flow and effect of that? And I don't think that that's what was, when the assurance model was looked at, it was probably more, well, here's what we're seeing, but no one really understanding, well, if I do take this amber forward, that is going to mean this. And I think that's the challenge, where people have assurance that really doesn't look at or doesn't have that understanding. They sort of look at it from a process point of view, or a framework point of view, as against a really functional point of view. So this function isn't going to work if you're still amber, sort of thing, because people are not going to know what to do, maybe, if that's what the outcome was. And that's the piece that I think they look at, they fail to look at, is the fact that the assurance piece is just looking at, well, yes, we've got all of these sort of things ticked, but we're not understanding what that actually means. So it's I think that's where that decision to go live was probably one that, in hindsight, you would have said, well, maybe I need more of those to be green, and be certain of that.
Yeah, and there's certainly, as you mentioned before, there's certainly a lot of internal politics or political pressure that you're under to go live, especially if you've already delayed 1 or 2 or 3 times, or however much. And especially if your board of directors or your executive team has a certain expectation and you've already missed that expectation, you're somewhat on a short leash, and you're less likely to want to delay again. But it's really important. It's easier said than done. I fully understand, but it's really important to take a step back and look at, if we delay the project, yes, we're going to spend more money and it's going to take more time. People are going to become a little bit more skeptical of the project because here we are delaying again. And there are costs and risks associated with that, but you have to compare that cost and risk. So you have to compare that cost and risk, with the overall impact of go live. And I think that's where a lot of companies just completely missed the ball or missed the big picture of, it might cost you X amount of time and money to delay the go live, but it's going to cost you a lot more than that to screw it up and, have a failed implementation. So that's hard for people to get their minds around a lot because they're so focused on, we just have to go live and we have to stop the spend. We have to stop the bleeding. But then they just punt the problem to the future. And now you've gone live, congratulations. But now the operations are a disaster and you can't service your customers. You can't ship product or whatever the case may be. Is that a dynamic you see often as well?
Well, it is, and it's an interesting one because you say, well, we go live, we'll stop the bleeding, but you actually don't. You actually increase the amount of blood flow,
right?
And that's the bit that many don't. They sort of think, well, once I've gotten this out of the way, then my responsibility is shifted, and right. And that's, I think, where some of those decisions don't understand the full impact of going live and not being ready to go live, and that's where you see these ones that they prematurely do it because they feel the pressure, or like you say, there's a number of elements that are saying you must, instead of someone standing up and saying, well, this is what is likely to happen. Are you prepared to do that? And maybe that was said, but in this case, there's still more money to go as such. So yes, they are operational, but as they freely admit in that audit report, there is a significant amount of work to do, and they're just starting now. COVID sort of interrupted some of that remediation work, but they're just starting now to actually work on that remediation. So this isn't probably the end of how much they will continue to bleed.
Yeah, and that's a great segue into the last question I had, which is, they're doing this restart, and then they're doing the what are they calling it? The business integration project, which is basically to optimize the benefits and stabilize the system and just get more out of the existing implementation. But with that in mind, and having the benefit of hindsight, what kind of recommendations would you make to the team at Queensland Health in terms of either, let's start with what to do from here on forward. What would you recommend based on where they are right now from what we know? What would your recommendations be there?
I think they need to go back and actually start to look at those processes that they have in place now and see where the differences are between what they perceive as being what the process should be as against what's actually happening in the business. And that will uncover many of the things, that the gaps in workflow, the gaps in data, information that might be there. And so I think that's probably their starting point. If they can actually understand what really they are doing as processes now as against what they perceive they would be doing or what the solution was built around, that's probably a really good starting point for them to work on.
Yeah. Now I'll maybe rewind the game film even more now and say, now that we've got the benefit of hindsight, which is always a nice luxury to have, if you could rewind and go to the beginning of this Queensland Health project, or more importantly, for everyone else listening that's not part of Queensland Health and maybe they're about to start a digital transformation or ERP project of their own, what would you say are some of the handful of key lessons or takeaways from this case study that we could all apply to our digital transformations going forward?
I think the first stage is actually getting the executive group that owns it from the client's perspective, so in this case Queensland Health, to really understand what they're putting in and what they're actually looking to put in and what decisions they will need to make along the way, because those decisions have a flow-on effect. And I think that in the case of this one, they probably didn't understand. They looked at the fact that we're putting in a technology solution that will fix our problems, but it can create a lot more problems than it actually has. And then the next piece is, okay, so as an organization, what are our processes all the same, or are they not? And from a high level they might, but it's really delve down and say, well, let's understand what we do and where our differences are and address those, because then that helps understand how much we have to change the way people work, how we have to train people, and so there's a lot of flow. Those two early on pieces help feed a lot of the information you need to actually be successful in delivering your outcome.
Yeah, that's great. Great advice. A good takeaway for the audience here. And this is a lot to take in. And we were talking before we started recording this, that there's a lot of information in this case study that we oftentimes don't have with public records, but given that it's a government entity, there's more available to us. So there's a lot of good lessons learned, but it can be overwhelming too. But I think, to your point, the way you've simplified the last answer you had there is that it's a lot of this stuff we're talking about is it's not just noise, but it's more symptoms of deeper root causes. And when you get to the deeper root causes, usually there's a lot more manageable number of root causes. And if you can fix those and tackle those, it's going to clean up a lot of this other noise and symptoms and smoke that you see coming out of these types of situations. So I think that's really good advice.
And it's interesting, Eric. One of the things that I think that in one of your podcasts just recently, you talked about the canary in when things are going wrong. I think at the early stages, you almost need someone who actually can, because you can't expect that people are going to understand what technology is going to do for their business or interpret what that means. And so I think there's that process of saying, well, okay, the vendor's saying this. What does that actually mean for our business? So it's helping people understand, take them on that journey of, because one decision leads into many decisions. And so it's almost like early on having that ability to actually go, so that means that. So the decision I'm making is not that one, it's this one over here. And that will impact my future. And a lot of organizations are getting caught in this thing of not having that understanding. They I suppose, jump to assumption, that would mean that, when not always, when hindsight, did it actually ever mean that? And I think that's one of the areas that hopefully the future takes us in organizations when they're looking, because technology is confusing. ERP is more complex than probably anything else I've ever come across. And so it is one of those things that you can't expect that someone would know what it is. Even in your court cases, why do you have an expert witness? The barrister doesn't know. You've got to unpick that. And so you're interpreting what they find. And I think that's one of the areas that organizations need to consider in the front end.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's a good segue into how third stage works with clients. You and I and our teams, both in Australia and Asia Pacific, as well as in the US and the UK, all of our teams provide that quality assurance, program management type of support that's meant to help clients from the beginning. So you can be that canary in the coal mine to catch some of the problems before they become a real problem. And then we also do, we help a number of companies that are midstream and they've run into trouble in the midst of their implementations. We've come in to course correct and help them recover the projects. And then certainly helping with change management and evaluating and selecting software. Those are some of the other areas that the third stage team can help, including your team there in Australia.
And it comes in with that bit of unbiased. It's not like we've actually got a towing a vendor line or a system integrator line. We're saying, well, we're there to achieve the outcome, and that's what we're focusing on. Considering all of those other impacts. And so I think it's that bit of difference that where the third stage sort of finds itself in many of these cases.
Yeah. Our job is not to make the software or the software vendors look good. Our job is to make the clients look good and to make sure their operations look good, more importantly.
Exactly right.
Well, good. Well, thanks for your time, Wayne. This is a great conversation, and hopefully the audience got some good value out of it. And I learned a lot, as I do every time you and I speak. So thank you very much for your time and for being here today.
No worries. No, it's great. And it's good to be able to share that discussion, because it's a very, very deep discussion, isn't it?
It is. Yeah, a lot to unpack there. So, well, thank you.
If you are involved in any sort of digital transformation or business change initiative, you will want to download the 2021 Digital Transformation Report. With its comprehensive overview of business and technology trends and best practices, this report is a must-have guide for any transformation project or executive team. Download this free report by visiting Third Stage Consulting at thirdstage-consulting.com. You can also visit our website to learn more about us or download independent reports, videos, and other best practices. Again, visit thirdstage-consulting.com today to learn how you can take your transformation to the third stage of success.
Welcome back to Transformation Ground Control. My name is Eric Kimberling. I'm here with Paresa Noble. Again, if you haven't subscribed to us, be sure to subscribe on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, Pandora, wherever you listen or watch to podcasts. So, Paresa, the interview we just had with Wayne was pretty eye-opening, pretty interesting. What are some of your thoughts, or what jumped off the page at you as you were listening to Wayne talk?
Yeah, well, this sounds kind of like a colossal failure, if I'm being honest. I thought it was interesting. You brought up a crazy perspective that I wanted to touch on. And it's ironic when you think about it. You know, we as humans, as a society, we don't hunt for food. We don't make our own clothes. We don't make our own safety gear. We lean so heavily on the companies around us, and we're so fully reliant on all these organizations that supply these things to us. So when you look at ERP failure, if it's with a clothing brand or, another company like that, it's not as big of a deal. But when you look at companies in the healthcare industry, in utilities, in energy, in government, in connectivity, I mean, if they experience an ERP failure, it's something that could really potentially impact people's lives. And, the fact that Queensland Health had to go through this and is still probably picking up the pieces, it's, a little bit of a reality check and an eye opener that this can happen, and it could weigh a lot more than it would in other situations. So that was the first thing that stood out to me is, you don't think about it like that when it's, just another company, because consumers can always go to a different brand, but with healthcare, it's like, that's your health, that's your livelihood, that's your, you know, so I thought that was very interesting. I wanted to look at the conversation around who was responsible, because it sounds like that maybe was the starting point of it all. So refresh my memory and tell me if I understood this correctly. They had a lot of transitions in who was owning the project throughout what was supposed to be a 2-year project.
Yeah. A lot of at the project management and even at the executive level, there was a churn and turnover, which, by the way, is oftentimes another symptom of something deeper going on. I mean, it's not that you don't get your ineffective project manager that you need to replace. That does happen. You get your executive sponsor who is over his or her head. That happens as well. But more often than not, especially when you see it repeatedly, there's something deeper going on, either in the culture of the organization or just the way the headwinds are blowing in terms of the lack of alignment and some of the misunderstanding of why we're doing this project and how decisions are made and all that stuff. So all that stuff can lead to the churn that we saw there. But you're right, there was quite a bit of turnover, in the leadership and the direction of the project.
Right. And I mean, if you have your point person who's kind of leading the sales switch out halfway through, and you bring in a new person with new beliefs, new ideas, that's going to change course, a little bit. So I imagine that had a huge impact on where they ended up. Of all our failures, I mean, ERP failures that we've kind of explored together, and just for context, I'm on the marketing side, right? So I'm learning about these ERP failures from our team. But this is the first time I'm hearing of kind of reorgs in the middle of a transformation to this extent. I mean, digital transformations, they take a few years, right? I mean, it's not like it's a quick process to just completely uphaul your whole system. So I imagine, there's some, changes in a team structure, et cetera. But to this scale, I'm not sure that I've heard that this is something that happens frequently. So have you seen this? I mean, is this something that, clients can kind of get away with if they have new employees coming in, new leadership coming in mid-project? Or, and if they are dealing with that, what are some ways to kind of keep the project on track rather than letting it kind of pivot depending on who's now in the hot seat?
Yeah, first of all, you're right. For most organizations, it's a multi-year journey when they go through a big transformation like this. For some smaller organizations, of course, it can take less. I mean, some organizations we work with could take just a few months, depending on how small they might be. But with larger and more complex organizations, that drives up your time and cost and risk. But as far as the question around, is that advisable to make these sorts of changes right in the middle of a project, and how does it impact the project? First of all, every organization has to run their business. I mean, they've got to do what they need to do to run the business, and the transformation oftentimes has to kind of pivot to whatever the changes are that they're going through. Having said that, most organizations aren't very good at aligning their changes in their future state operations and their future state organization or their reorg or restructurings, they're not good at keeping their transformation in sync with that. And that's where, people kind of treat them as two different things. We're going to reorg over here. We're going to change our operational model over here. And then, oh, by the way, over here, we've got this transformation going. And, those things don't often enough come together. And that's where so many companies struggle.
Right. So I guess if a company finds themselves in that position where, they lost one of their leaders that was spearheading the change, what's some, word to the wise? What's your advice to them on what they can do to keep the project in line?
Well, the first is to, focus on that alignment piece and make sure that you have not just buy-in in terms of you signing off on the check or signing off on the budget for the project or approving the budget. A lot of times executives think, okay, I've done that. I've sent out an email to all employees explaining why we're doing this project, and now the team's going to go execute. And they think, their role kind of stops there. And there's a lot more to it. There's a lot more, rolling up the sleeves and get your hands dirty as an executive, where you have to sometimes help make decisions around what our future state operations are going to be and whatnot. So just making sure that alignment is in place and that you've got this sort of alignment on what this project is going to mean or what this transformation is going to mean to you and your organization. That's one thing. The next thing is to find the right balance between how much you're going to do this yourself versus how much you're going to bring in outside help. There's two extremes that both lead to failure in that case. So in one extreme, which is probably where I'd say most organizations fall, or at least the ones we see, where they have this sort of outsource mentality of we're going to bring in a system integrator. They're the experts. They're just going to do all this for us. And they can and will do it all for you, but they're going to steamroll you in the process. And they're going to decide for you how your organization is going to look. And they're going to define for you what your operations, your organization is going to look like. So that's not a good sign. And usually that's the model that leads to massive overruns and, just lack of alignment and that sort of thing. The other extreme is we're going to do it all ourselves. We've never done an ERP implementation, or maybe we have some people on our team who've done it in past lives. We're going to sort of bring it all in-house and try and just do this ourselves. That's a recipe for disaster too, because chances are your organization doesn't do this more than once every 10 or 20 years or whatever. So that's not nearly enough skill set or capability to successfully manage a transformation. So the key there is to find, what is the right balance of outsourcing versus building internal competencies. You need to do both. I mean, that's the reality of it. And that's, most organizations feel like it's an either or binary decision. They end up going to one extreme or the other, and that ends up leading to failure. So that's another thing that executives need to be very mindful of. In fact, we have one client right now that's similar to other clients I've seen in the past, where they've reached out to us and said, okay, we've started down this path with our system integrator. It's one of the larger system integrators that are implementing SAP, which is one of the bigger ERP systems in the market. And the project run rate, as far as the money they're spending on this, has just gotten out of control. I mean, they're spending way too much money on this project with the system integrator. They feel like they don't have any ownership of the project, so they've called a timeout, paused the project. They called us and said, hey, can you come help us figure out how to get this back on track? And we see it all the time, especially with our project recoveries like this one, where people have tried it on their own. They hire us to come in and fix whatever got broken. Or in some cases, oftentimes we're called in as expert witnesses too. And in those cases, you see those same expert witness, by the way, which I didn't know this until I became one a few years ago. Expert witness is when you're hired by an attorney to testify in court about what went wrong in this particular case, and then they fight over whose fault it was, but you come in as the expert to analyze it. So in those cases where we're hired as an expert witness, you see this dynamic a lot. So finding that balance between insourcing and outsourcing, and then also making sure you've got alignment. Those are probably two big things you could start with. And then I'd say a third one is just to really double down on change management. And whatever you think you're doing that you think is enough, or if you think that your organization is not going to resist change and that change management isn't going to be important, or it's not going to be important until later on in the project, I guarantee you're absolutely wrong. I don't care what organization you are. I don't care how confident you are that change isn't going to be difficult. It will be difficult. And in fact, I've yet to see an organization that found it to be easier than they thought it would be from an organizational perspective. So change management would probably be a close third on that one. I know you only asked for one, but I give you three things. So
Hey.
what I think they should do.
That's the more the merrier, right? It's interesting because the whole concept of organizational change management, it sounds simple. Like it sounds like it'd be something very intuitive, kind of, I could see people putting that on the back burner like, oh yeah, that's easy. That's the easy part. But it sounds like that could be the hardest part is getting everybody going the same direction and being happy about it.
It's very true. I mean, the challenge with change management is you can't see it, touch it, or feel it. And you eventually will feel it, but usually you don't feel it, or the lack thereof of change management. You'll feel that, after go live. And that's, obviously way too late at that point. So there's just this false sense of confidence that organizations get. We hear it all the time. I mean, I'd say 70 or 80% of clients we work with, they say early in the project, they say, oh yeah, we know change management's important, but you know what? It's not going to be that hard for us because everyone's excited about the change. They hate this old system they're using. They want to do things differently. They see the vision for the future, and that's great. They probably do. I never really doubt that statement. But the problem is when it becomes personal and you start, imposing, for lack of a better word, you're imposing changes on people that's very personal and it's disruptive and it creates uncertainty and it's unintentional. It's not sabotage. I mean, I think that's what people think of when they think change management. They think, okay, I don't see anyone out there sabotaging this thing or derailing the project intentionally, so I think change management's going to be fine. Well, that's not what you have to worry about. The sabotage is, that's actually easier to deal with because it's so blatant and it's easy to spot. It's the underlying currents of uncertainty and, misalignment and all that stuff that's really hard to peg for people that haven't done it a lot before.
Sure. And comfort zones and their spreadsheets, like
Yep.
that production director.
Yeah, exactly.
Sam's comment. Yep, I hear it. And that brings me to my next question. You guys talked a lot about, change the processes to fit the software or change the software to fit the processes. So I'm curious about that because is there a right or a wrong there? I'll start there.
Yeah, there is a right, and the right is what's right for your business. I mean, it's easy to say, that it's an all or nothing proposition or question, and the reality is it usually ends up being a hybrid of both. I mean, there's going to be cases, for example, like accounts payable is a good example, or general ledger. Those are things where, yeah, you probably have your own way of doing things, but you're probably going to be okay as an organization if you just adopt however modern technology works, whatever software you're implementing. But if you look at things like, your sales processes, your customer service, or even your production or manufacturing processes, if you're a manufacturer, things that are more client or product facing, things that are more likely to be your secret sauce or your competitive advantage or your differentiator in the marketplace, those are the things where you're going to be less likely to say, whatever the system does is fine. You're probably going to say, no, this is our secret sauce. The software needs to fit this, not the other way around. Software vendors will tell you, oh, no, we've got best practices in our software because it sounds good and we all wish it existed, but it's like unicorns, they don't exist. And some of us may wish they did, but you have to deal with the reality of it. So it's a matter of finding that right balance between the two.
Right. Yeah, that makes sense. Because my initial thought when I heard that was, if you're going to change your processes to fit the software, aren't you setting yourself up for a more challenging change management journey just because your team is used to the processes, So if they have to change themselves to fit the software, wouldn't you come across more challenges rather than if you were just changing the software to fit what your team is already doing? You know what I mean?
Yeah. It's a very astute observation. I mean, it's the reason why the term customization, which is meant to describe what you do when you basically change the software or change the code of the software, or do some heavy duty changes to the software, that's usually viewed as a negative thing, and rightfully so, because it creates a slippery slope of risk and extra cost, and suddenly upgrades don't work, in the future if you change the software too much. And I always view that concept of customization and change management as it's almost like a seesaw. If you invest more in change management, you're probably less likely to want to change the software because you're not resisting the change as an organization. If you don't invest in change management, you're probably going to end up customizing more. If you customize more, on the other hand, it does take some of the pressure off change management because now you've sort of more accommodated the people in the way they are today or the way they want things to be. But that's not necessarily the best thing for the company. So it's really finding the balance in that seesaw of change management, customization, and really recognizing that just because you invest more or less in one doesn't mean it doesn't affect the other. So they're very much interrelated, to your point, as far as how you get people to either conform to the software, which is more difficult from a change management perspective, or you force the software to conform to the organization, which puts more risk on the technical customization integration side of things.
Right. I guess pros and cons to both sides, right? Trade-offs.
Yeah.
It
Well, we're all
depends
looking
on
for
the
that silver bullet.
organization.
We're all looking for the easy button, but it doesn't exist. You have to, literally every decision you make in these sorts of journeys are trade-offs. You're just trading one risk for another, but the key is to find the best risk profile and the best path for your organization.
Right. Right. Wise. I like it. The last thing that really stuck out to me kind of prompted a question around data migration, because I know one of the things that they had troubles with was they had 482,000 obsolete invoices. They, kind of messed up, it sounds like, on the metrics when it comes to ordering gloves. They were ordering what they thought would be like 5,000 gloves, but really they ordered 5 gloves type of thing.
Right.
So, I mean, maybe we could touch a little bit on data migration and the fact that that's probably a way bigger component, before you actually migrate the data, is cleaning up your data. What do you think? They did a good job at that, or was that an area of opportunity for them, was going through and making sure it was actually good data that they were transferring onto the new platform?
Yeah, it's first of all, data is a common challenge. Because data gets corrupt over time as, broken business processes and human errors corrupt the data. And most organizations don't ever go back to clean that up. So then when they implement new technology and they've got to bring all that data over, they're inherently bringing over data that's dirty or flawed in some way. The key though is, so it could be this is what they call a master data potential issue. And so master data would be, an example would be, if I'm a hospital and I have a certain type of glove, I'm going to have a description of it's this glove, and here's a description of it. It's going to have an identifier or a code, a number associated with it typically, and then it's going to have a determination in the data, quantitative determination of the unit of measure. So is it one box, or in this case they thought they were ordering a box of 500 or whatever it was, but really they were just ordering one glove. So that's sort of a master data unit of measure issue where, for whatever reason, I don't know if it's because the data they brought over from the old system was wrong. I suspect it was more of a user error or a configuration error in the system, or maybe it's a combination of all the above. But you have to make sure that people understand now when you enter one in the system, you're not entering a box, you're entering one glove, and it could be a training issue. Or it could be when we set it up, we should have established it as 1 equals 500 gloves. But for whatever reason, they didn't do that. And that's a common issue, by the way, that issue they had with the gloves that we're talking about with Wayne, and whether we're ordering a box of 500 or whether we're ordering one glove. That's a really common issue or problem with companies that manufacture like food and beverage, where you have all these strange units of measure that you're now converting to a different unit of measure. So you might have, just small ounces of ingredients that go into a single can or a single bottle of whatever your beverage is, or, into a food product or whatever. So those recipes of how much of these different ingredients with different units of measure, or different measurements, how it gets converted into a different unit of measure, that whole process is fraught with risk, and a lot of systems just can't handle it. So you have to be real careful when you're moving the systems and the data over.
Interesting. Yeah, that's something that could really throw you off if you're, food and beverage world.
Yeah,
Totally ruin your product.
Yeah, definitely.
That's awesome. Well, hopefully, sending good vibes to Queensland Health and hoping that they bounce back without, spending too much more. I don't know if they're already bounced back or if they're still going through it. I know you said they spent $3.1 million after go live to try to clean it up. So hopefully that's where the line is drawn and there's no more and they can bounce back.
Absolutely. And like you said, it's scary to think about a transformation like that, if being a life and death situation, but hopefully their patients are all taken care of, and they've figured out a way to deal with the flaws of the system. And most organizations can do that, especially, a hospital setting. That's their job, is to save lives. It's not to use computers necessarily, which, I guess is good and bad in some ways.
Yeah, true. Do you think this will go to litigation? Do you think they'll need an eyewitness?
I don't know, but I may have conflicted myself from being an expert witness just because we're having this discussion. But
Uh-oh.
that's okay. We're just talking about it. But I don't know. It's most failures don't end up in court, but when they're big enough and there's enough money at stake, they oftentimes do.
Interesting. Well,
Yeah.
I guess we'll find out.
We will. Well, good. Well, thanks for that discussion. We're going to take a quick break, and we're going to be back with Alison Moy talking about women in technology. You're going to interview her and have a good discussion there, so I'm really looking forward to that. We'll be back with more Transformation Ground Control right after this.
If you are involved in any sort of digital transformation or business change initiative, you will want to download the 2021 Digital Transformation Report. With its comprehensive overview of business and technology trends and best practices, this report is a must-have guide for any transformation project or executive team. Download this free report by visiting Third Stage Consulting at thirdstage-consulting.com. You can also visit our website to learn more about us, or download independent reports, videos, and other best practices. Again, visit thirdstage-consulting.com today to learn how to take your transformation to the third stage of success.
Feeling blessed, never stressed. Got that sunshine on my...
Hi, Allison. Thanks for being with us today.
Thanks so much for having me. I'm honored to be part of your podcast. So exciting. This is my first one. So great to be on today.
Perfect. Yeah, I think you have a lot of great insights that I'm excited for you to share, just given your background, your experience, what you're doing. So let's start at the 50,000 foot view. Tell me a little bit about your background, what your role entails today, and really what you're looking at as far as your career in this day and age.
Yeah, so I am currently at Sling TV. We're a live and on-demand streaming service, and Sling is part of the broader Dish corporation. And so I've actually been at Dish over almost 9 years now, which is crazy. I started back as an intern when I was still in college and came out full time, came out to Denver, of course, which was an added plus. And so I've been in tech at Dish for my entire career thus far, and really started with a foundation in customer service and experience, which I think has made me just a stronger employee, especially with my focus in the past few years on product management. And having that really focus on the customer and that background and foundation, I think, has been really valuable in how I approach customer problems, and build solutions for them. And so I've been in product for over 4 years now. Absolutely love it. Love working with engineering, love working with design. Again, being focused on the customer and really having an impact has been great for me personally, and just have been able to grow and be challenged in my career. In addition, I've been very active and involved in diversity and inclusion efforts at the company. Our Dish Women's Network was the first employee resource group. We actually launched just over 6 years ago, which is crazy. And so the Women's Network is something that I got involved in about a year after it launched. And, I was looking for ways that I can better impact the business and stretch myself outside of my job at the time. And really just fell in love with the people leading the network, and it's entirely volunteer ran. All that additional time is on top of everyone's real jobs. And so was able to meet and connect with a lot of people that I would not have had the chance to. I know you and I met through those different efforts. And so, here we are today, but the Women's Network has been a huge part of my career at Dish. And, we started as a group looking to help drive more equal representation across gender at the leadership levels and really empower women. And I've had the fortune and to really grow into leading that organization. And so I started off kind of small, driving membership, and I've now actually been president of the Women's Network over the past 2 years. And when I came in, we were at a point where the network was established with quite a few members, and we've really hit a lot of the goals in focusing on women. And with other employee resource groups coming about, I took the step on, okay, it's not just about women. How do we create an inclusive work environment for everybody, whether it's women of color, LGBTQ plus community, across the board. And so I think partially the intersectionality of many people are women, but there's Latina women, there's Black women, there's gay women. And so really being cognizant of everyone is unique and different, and really being open to diverse perspectives and diversity. People's diversity looks different. And so that's been a big focus the past 2 years. And I think we've been able to come a long way in our conversations and building the community, and not only having conversations with members and other employee resource groups and employees, but having those conversations with leadership from the executive level on the DISH side on, hey, we need to talk about these things, we need to focus on these things, and it needs to come from the ground up and from the top down.
Right.
So
And I see.
Yeah, sorry, that was a lot of information, but there's, so happy to
No,
dive
there's
in.
a lot. There's a lot there. I love it. So, it's interesting because you mentioned it. That's how you and I met was, I also worked at DISH, and I was a part of the Women's Network. And even from just a personal experience, I know the support that network gave to myself, to my other female peers that I was working with. It made a big difference, especially when you're in a male-dominated industry. The tech industry, just like, engineering, there's so many industries that are male-dominated, and it can be a little bit intimidating, especially as a young woman coming out of college and joining this team, right, or this industry. But it's important to have this conversation because diversity in thought leads to growth. And I think that's the most important thing that everybody needs to realize, men, women, everyone across the board, because it's that diversity in thought that gives you that well-rounded perspective to help push your organization forward. There's a sociologist named Michael Kimmel who said, gender equality is in the interest of countries, of companies, and of men, their children, and their partners. It's not a zero-sum game. It's not a win-lose. It's a win-win for everybody. And we also know that we can fully empower women and girls by getting the boys and men engaged in the conversation. So that's what I kind of want to focus on today is, providing that perspective and really just, hearing about your experience, but also talking about the different things that Women's Network is doing to help push and move that needle. So tell me a little bit about, you said you started at Dish/Sling 9 years ago. There's a lot that's changed just in the television industry in 9 years. You've gone from regular cable to over-the-top streaming services, and you've been right there at the forefront with it in the product management side for one of the leading over-the-top services, Sling, right? So tell me a little bit about the comparison of when you first entered the tech industry. How did you feel as a young woman coming out of college and starting your career compared to fast forward 9 years today? What has that experience been like, and what has shifted for you?
Yeah, absolutely. So coming in after school, so I've been somebody, and just kind of going back to my foundation with my family. So I've always been very ambitious. I'm very competitive. I played sports, team sports growing up my entire life. And, thinking kind of on school and how that helped me, be comfortable or be uncomfortable and still be successful, kind of diving into my career. Math was my favorite subject growing up, and I, took those more senior classes in my whole life from high school to college, and there are definitely fewer women in math classes. And when I got to business school, definitely fewer women. And so I had that experience with, getting into your first job. Of course, it's, slightly different than just business school projects, but I had that kind of lifelong experience of being one of a very few or being one of only women in group settings. And so I had that a bit of a foundation coming into school. And I think just as somebody, like I mentioned, who's always been ambitious, sometimes overly ambitious, um, with plans and such, but I felt confident overall coming in, and was able to navigate that pretty successfully early on. I will say, of course, I think at the time I felt that I was doing better and more comfortable than I probably was in hindsight. And I think there was definitely a level of, my manager was a man, and everybody up in the chain was a man. And working on projects, I was often the only woman. And not only was I young, but having that different perspective, I definitely felt like I needed to prove myself even more and work even harder. And I know that's something that is a pretty common theme with women on, I constantly have to prove myself. Everyone's story varies, and the level of support from leadership, of course, varies. And so I was lucky in my early career. My manager was supportive. Did we have open conversations about diversity and inclusion? No. I think that was something A, is early on, and B, that became more of a later passion and a later recognition of myself. But I would say also early on, in hindsight, I would have liked to have either recognized that looking for mentors was key, and to bounce ideas off of. And there wasn't anybody that came to me and was like, "Hey, I want to mentor you." So I think I would have definitely benefited early on from that level of support. And as somebody who's kind of always been pretty independent, I think I, especially early on, was like, I don't need help at all. That's kind of how I operated. And so I've definitely learned over the years, like, you need to ask for help. You can't do everything. And have gotten a lot of, especially when I joined the Women's Network early on, hearing different women and their experiences, and talking about mentorship, and talking about raising your hand for things, and talking about having those open conversations, like, oh, like, I've been doing this alone this whole time. And there's people out there that are feeling the same, and there's also people out there that want to specifically support me. And so I think that evolution of um, building that community and building relationships has infinitely grown from the time that I started to, of course, later in my career. And one of the other key factors that came about a couple years ago, so coming in as an intern, or post intern to Dish, we particularly don't get paid very much. And I actually tried to negotiate my salary coming in full time, and was told that I couldn't. But so you start pretty low, and for me, my ambitions and growth have, especially early on, were never about money and was never about title. I wanted to do good work. I wanted to make an impact, and of course, I definitely wanted to grow and be promoted. But the money was, nice, and I, was in a position where I didn't have to be concerned with my salary at the time. In hindsight, I don't know how I got by, practically. But it wasn't until a couple years later where kind of that base level was so low, and it wasn't just for me. I think it's just for everybody that was an intern. But that base level was so low that, and I didn't care, quote unquote, care about the money at the time. And I think that really hurt me moving into my career. And it wasn't until I joined the Sling team, and my very, very supportive manager, who's my manager now still, came to me and was like, "Hey, you are, like, exceeding expectations, a super high performer, high contributor, and I want to make sure that you're getting paid your value, and you are extremely underpaid right now." And I was just like, "What?" I had no idea. And that was the point where it is, of course, salary and money is, how you operate in your life and, move forward. And so there's, of course, that factor, but it wasn't until that conversation where I was kind of like, oh, it's not only there's the money side, but it's also I'm contributing so much to the company, and there needs to be a mutual, respect and value provided, and that's I think where that salary comes in. And so, that was the first time I recognized like, oh, okay, like I'm giving more than I'm getting from the company, and so thinking about it that way, I've now moving forward recognize that it's not I want this much money, it's I provide this much value and I'm worth this much. And so that's something else that I've really learned and have been passing on as well to women that I mentor, men that I mentor too, and getting over that discomfort level of talking about money and negotiating. And it's important. And the earlier on in your career that you can be comfortable or get over the uncomfortableness of having those conversations and earning what you deserve and what you're valued, the better, because every single time that you're promoted or move jobs, it's building upon what you've started. And so the more money that you can make earlier on, the better that you'll be, set up for success, later on, especially if you're like me and stay at a company for a long time. That's where it's incredibly important to recognize that early on.
Absolutely. I love that story, and kudos to your manager because, I mean, it just goes to show that they recognize the value that you're bringing to the company, but also recognize, hey, this isn't fair. We need to level the playing field. So that takes me to, another topic that I wanted to talk about, which is alliances. In that situation, your manager was acting as an ally to you because he could see, somebody else that's in a similar position, is getting paid this much where you're getting paid this much. And it's bringing the people who are producing at the same level or the people who are producing more than others up to that monetary, I guess, salary, right? And making sure that that gap isn't there just on the basis of X, whatever X is, whether it be, the gender wage gap or it be because you came in as an intern, et cetera. So tell me a little bit about, that's one example of an ally, right? Is someone who's recognizing, hey, this woman is one of my top producers. She deserves to get paid more, right? What else? How else could somebody be an ally to the people around them, whether it be to females, to African Americans, et cetera? How can you be an ally to your peers around you?
Yeah, no, love this question, love this topic. I mean, there's so many different ways, and I know I'm not going to, I'll cover just a subset, but I think it all starts with bias and recognizing that everybody has bias, recognizing that you've bias, that, and recognizing what those are. And I think what was exciting to see last year, and, one of the events that we typically put on for the Women's Network are training events. And so we've had a variety of unconscious bias training over the last few years. And this was something that we had many conversations with DISH executives on having it be company-wide. And last year, the company launched a series of unconscious bias trainings, which, definitely a foundation and a first step in the right direction. Training doesn't solve everything, but that was really key in, talking about bias. And, I think that was something that unconscious bias people were afraid to even talk about and stayed away from. And so that recognition and knowing, there's some science behind it, I think, which is valuable. I mean, bias exists from, our evolution on, how we can make quick decisions, how we can literally recognize that is a lion and we need to run away from it. It sounds a little cheesy, but the bias is from, their automatic and unconscious responses to be able to make decisions, and often quickly. And so I think in a world where we don't need to run away from lions anymore, that still persists. And it's in, I'm from Cleveland, and every time in Denver I meet someone from Cleveland, I vibe and we have that conversation, and I may have a bias toward them because we have a common background, or I snowboard, or other women. There's so many different things that's interests and actions outside of the demographic, and so when it comes to work, I think as well, there's people's backgrounds and different biases can come in, but knowing what your biases are, and that they exist, really step one. And I think going through training, there's tons of resources out there. Google has a great unconscious bias resource. There's a free, I think it's hbr.org, that you can go through it and it'll answer some questions and it'll give you more insight on what your biases may be. And so step one overall. And I would say step two, well, kind of multiple steps, but really just exposing yourself to different perspectives. So one of the and I think this initial parts are what you can do for yourself in that recognition. And so understanding diverse perspectives as well. And this may be kind of in a there's the general understanding and learning, and then I'll touch on to tangible actions as well. But the diverse perspectives is the Women's Network. What we've done, especially in the last year, is hear all these podcasts you can listen to, hear all these books, hear all these films, especially promoting anti-racist resources throughout last year. But taking the time, and it takes effort, right? It takes effort, and so if you sit and do nothing, you're not going to be able to make progress. And so but at the same time, it's so critical to learn other people's perspectives. And so whether it's accessing those resources, whether it's getting coffee with somebody in a different demographic and just learning their backgrounds and building those relationships. Another very easy thing that I encourage everyone at DISH is join an employee resource group that's not in your demographic. I know I lead the Women's Network, so I'm in every single resource group, but it's important for you to meet those people, talk to them, hear their perspectives, and learn how you can be an ally to that specific demographic too, right? It's not going to exactly be the same for every single person. And so those are pretty, I would say, it takes effort, but not too much effort, right? And I think some tactical examples, just from, I'd say, kind of in the workplace, it's being biases, perspectives. I think for something for women, that I talk to sometimes on specific examples on, their studies show that women get interrupted more by both men and women. And so one kind of easy way to be an ally, and of course it's not just for women, but an easy way to be an ally is if someone gets interrupted, speak up and make sure that they can finish their sentence. Another thing is making sure that when somebody, especially women, provide a good idea, or make a intelligent comment, make sure that she's given credit for that idea, whether it's reiterating oh, thank you, Paresa, that's a really great idea, thank you for contributing, and then making sure in subsequent conversations that she or he gets that credit. And then of course, if you see people make prejudiced comments, if you're comfortable, raise your hand and say something. Of course, depending on the situation and who, maybe that's something where you pull that person aside and have a private conversation later. Or maybe it's something where you kind of question it in the moment. Another, again, key example is just with gender biases and stereotypes over time. Women tend to be given the task of taking notes or cleaning the kitchen area in the office and stuff like that. Just don't, I think just don't assume and don't ask a woman every single time to do that. And so if it is taking notes, just be deliberate and have rotating schedules of everybody in the room will take notes kind of each day. And don't assume that women are going to clean up after you. I know that one's a little bit more extreme, but it may happen less often. But those kind of things are super important, and just some kind of key tangible examples.
Oh, those are great. I think it's so important to have the tangible, uh, you know, the actual activities that you could walk away with and implement today, as you go about, your workday. So great insights. Let's go ahead and take a quick break, and we will be right back after this short message.
The Templars and the Saracens, they're traveling in the Holy Land.
If you are aiming for transformation success, turn to Third Stage Consulting Group. Third Stage's independent and technology agnostic consulting team helps clients define their digital strategies, define their roadmaps, and manage their transformations. With offices in the US, Europe, and Australia, our team helps the world's most forward-thinking organizations through their transformation pitfalls and risks. If you are embarking on a digital transformation or business change initiative, contact Third Stage Consulting to see how we can help you reach the third stage of transformation success. Learn more about us and download independent reports, videos, and other best practices at thirdstageconsulting.com.
They break the skies into believing the strangest things.
Welcome back to Transformation Ground Control. I am here with Alison Moy with Sling TV and the president of Dish Women's Network. Thanks for being with us, Alison. So let's pick up on this conversation. It's very interesting. I want to go back to kind of what you were saying at the beginning. When you first started your career, you didn't even really realize that you were doing all of this alone until somebody reached out and kind of pulled you up in a sense. So I feel like that plays into the unconscious side a little bit from both sides, because you have people who are like, I support women. Like, I want women to have the same pay grade. I don't have an unconscious bias, right? And then it's also women who think, I'm not being treated differently, or I'm not being paid differently. So it's really kind of just until you shine a light on it and really acknowledge it. It's something that isn't really obvious in a lot of cases, right? So I want to go back to the people who have pulled you up in that sense. So let's touch on mentorship really quick, because it is so important for people, especially coming into their career, to have the right mentor. So how can somebody find a mentor? Where should they look? Should they just go up to somebody and ask them, can you mentor me? Or what's the best way to approach that situation?
Yeah, there's definitely not one way, for sure. I think there's, and the way that I talk about mentorship is, while I think I would say 80% of the work should be done by the mentor, give or take. And so it definitely, you need to take the steps, and you need to take the responsibility and energy towards finding mentors. And not only once you find it, putting effort into those conversations and being direct and particular about what you want to gain from that mentorship. But at the same time, leaders should be actively seeking to be mentors as well. I think we need to have that mutual, people seeking that out in order to continue to drive towards more equality, and have more equal representation at leadership levels, right? And so I think there's, if I'm a mentor, and one way that I've found, and one way that I've been connected with mentees is, talk to your manager, because your manager can be your mentor. But if you're looking to grow in specific skill areas, for instance, data analytics, and your boss doesn't have that skill, hey, I want to learn more about data analytics. Is there somebody that you can better connect me with, or have any of those recommendations? So that's something that you can ask your people that you already have relationships with, whether it's a manager, another senior leader on the team, in order to help connect you. I think as well, I always encourage people to, as busy as senior leaders are, vast majority are willing to spend 30 minutes a month, and spend time with you. And so while it may be uncomfortable, go ask that leader that you respect or admire, or that you want to learn from, and say, hey, I want to learn these things, and I think we could really benefit and have a mutual relationship. I'd love for you to be my mentor. And have that. Or you can just start with a, hey, I'd love to grab coffee for 30 minutes with you and build from there. Maybe they aren't the person that maybe you realize that somebody else could better fill in the skills that you're looking for. And so just having a 30-minute coffee, I've never seen anybody say, no, I don't have time for a 30-minute coffee. So it does, you have to put yourself out there a little bit. But those are definitely some ways that you can do that. And at the same time too, I, as a leader on the team, will very deliberately build relationships and grab 30 minutes with more junior people on the team, just to be an additional resource for them. And some of those relationships have grown into more mentorship. Some of them are kind of ad hoc. But I make sure to specifically support women on the team, and then I also try to mentor those that are in a different demographic than me as well. That's something that I encourage mentors all the time. Um, mentor somebody who, especially in an underrepresented group, but mentor somebody who's in a different demographic. Mentorship should be valuable to both the mentor and the mentee. And I think one other side of mentorship is a sponsorship. And so they're similar, but not the same. Mentors can be internal, external, across the board, building skills, building that relationship. Sponsorship is also critical. Someone can be a sponsor and a mentor to you, but sponsorship is somebody in your organization who is senior enough and can be your advocate for you in the room when you're not there. They'll be your advocate for when leadership's talking about promotions, when they're talking about talent planning, when they're talking about performance evaluations. And so actively seeking out and asking more senior leaders to be your sponsor is critical. Of course, ideally your performance and your output should also show for itself, but I would always recommend having those active and deliberate conversations, because at the end of the day, you may be doing great work, but I don't expect leadership to know exactly what you're doing. And the more that you can be direct with leadership on, I want you to sponsor me in the room because I want to be a VP one day, or I want to be promoted, or I want to be considered kind of as part of that succession planning. Leadership may not know. And so having those conversations and having the guts to talk to them and make it known, makes it so there's no guesses as to what leadership thinks of you or understands your career aspirations to be.
Right. That's so important. And, again, it goes back to how important a gender diverse company is. I read a study that said the gender diverse companies are 15% more likely to perform above the national industry median. So it is directly related to performance, and you have a vested interest in bringing people up with you if you are in a leadership role. So if you see somebody who has potential, if you see somebody who is performing at a high level and you want to bring them up, then bring them up, reach out. I mean, yes, you as an employee, you as somebody who wants to grow should pursue a mentor, of course, but you as a leader should also be keeping your eye out of who's up next, right? So tell me a little bit about what you think organizations, managers, leaders across the tech industry can start doing today to help drive diversity and inclusion within their teams.
Oh, yeah. Quite a few things. And I think too, and then you touched on it, but diverse teams, diversity is gender, it's race, it's background, it's skills, it's past industries. And so, diversity looks different, and can span a lot of different things. And you mentioned kind of in that stat already, diverse teams are more innovative. Diverse teams make better decisions, because not everyone is just saying yes in an agreement all the time, and they bring in different perspectives. Diverse teams drive more revenue. Executive teams and boards that are more diverse, or have at least boards that have more women on them, drive more revenue and are more successful companies. And it's not just because it's not because they're women, it's because those people happen to be women, bring different perspectives, and provide additional value, and help make better decisions. And so all of that's super important. And I think for what leaders and companies can do, a few different things. And McKinsey company and Lean In Women in the Workplace study that they do every single year has a ton of resources in it. I'd recommend reading that, and this is where it's one of the places I get that feedback. So overall, I would say going back to the biases, incorporate, talk about biases, offer unconscious bias training, and have those be kind of initial steps. I think mentorship and sponsorship is really key, and I know we've already talked about those. I would say setting evaluation criteria in advance. Sounds kind of obvious, but when we are, and I talk with my leadership team when we're going through performance reviews, and we just did a PA cycle at Dish, and when we're going through succession planning, making sure that we are listing out in advance, whether it's for this role in product management versus product design, and when we're looking at the different levels, make sure that you have that criteria set in advance and say, hey, we are weighing these people against these skills and responsibilities to be as objective as possible and to remove, avoid as much bias in those decisions. So that's really key. And I think one stat that I talk about on my team is, making sure that we're comparing people, because at the end of the day, like, that's what you have to do at an organization. But women are often hired for experience, and men are often hired or promoted for potential. And so that's something that we need to throw that out the window. Everyone has potential. You should probably look at both for everybody. But that plays into how we look at performance and evaluate. And so that objective evaluation criteria in advance is one of those key ways. Other ways, hiring. There are multiple ways that you can do it, from reviewing job descriptions, making sure that the language is gender neutral. Looking at one other statistic that has been shared with me over time is women often only apply for positions if they meet 100% of the qualifications listed, whereas men apply if they meet at least 60%. And so, I always tell both men and women, apply even though you may not meet everything, like, always apply. And then something that we've reviewed on the Sling side is, okay, if we have 40 different bullets on how people are going to be successful, that's more check boxes that people have to think that they fit into. And so, only focusing on what's really important in the job description is key. And then, putting together goals for having diverse slates. Making sure that you're interviewing multiple people, not just picking your favorite person. Ideally, interviewing at least one person, if not more, that is a woman, that is a minority, and at least having that, opening the door to select the best person at the end of the day, but being deliberate and opening that door for others.
Right. I love that. Great advice. And then the last question I want to leave our listeners with is, obviously we're in the middle of a pandemic, and that's interestingly taken a toll on women in the workforce. So what have you seen, or what studies have you seen of what impact this pandemic has had on women in tech?
Yeah, we are in a crisis. I would say an economic crisis for the amount of women that are leaving the workforce. The more women, and you mentioned it, the more women in the economy and contributing, the better everybody is, the better the economy is. And so since last February, 2.4 million women have left the workforce, as compared to only 1.8 million men. Of course, a lot on both sides, but it's staggering. And the reasons are because women are being forced to choose between work and being at home, whether it's childcare or caregiving for the elderly. And those gender stereotypes and women doing more work and home is real. And it's forcing women to make those decisions when men less often are required to make that decision for their family. So it's not only taking a toll on the workforce and the economy, but of course mental health. And that spans mental health. The impact of the pandemic has had is, spans everybody, but especially with women, and making that decision to leave the workforce, and being expected to balance work at home has definitely disproportionately impacted women, and all of the impact of the pandemic as well has impacted women of color even more significantly. And so there's a few different things that companies can do, but to keep it short, flexibility. Flexibility, I would say, is number one. Probably also number one, empathy. Lead with empathy. Treat your employees like humans. I know most companies are doing that, but it's that empathy and having those direct conversations are critical. And that flexibility, whether it's working from home, working weird or varying hours. And I think that's something that, again, a lot of companies, not every company, but a lot of companies have done, and that will help keep more women, especially moms, in the workforce overall. And hopefully post-pandemic, that is still the normal. Hopefully there is still that flexibility, because that impact was around before the pandemic, but the pandemic has only heightened it with the closing of schools, figuring out childcare, virtual schooling, and all of that. So flexibility, normalize kids being around, normalize letting people not work from 4 to 7 to make dinner. People can come back online later at night, so definitely that flexibility, and hopefully that's a more positive change that the pandemic has done. So that flexibility will hopefully continue once things are a bit back to normal.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. Well, absolutely amazing insights, Alison. So thank you so much for joining us on our podcast today. We look forward to talking to you again soon. Thanks so much.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me.
If you are aiming for transformation success, turn to Third Stage Consulting Group. Third Stage's independent and technology agnostic consulting team helps clients define their digital strategies, define their roadmaps, and manage their transformations. With offices in the US, Europe, and Australia, our team helps the world's most forward-thinking organizations through their transformation pitfalls and risks. If you are embarking on a digital transformation or business change initiative, contact Third Stage Consulting to see how we can help you reach the third stage of transformation success. Learn more about us and download independent reports, videos, and other best practices at thirdstage-consulting.com.
Okay, welcome back to Transformation Ground Control. Paresa, thanks for that interesting interview with Alison. It was a very, very interesting conversation. I learned a lot there, a lot of things I didn't know. One thing in particular that was super interesting is the comment that she made about gender diverse leadership teams producing 15% higher than national industry average. I mean, it's interesting as a white middle-aged male, one of the least diverse people in the workforce. It's interesting to see that actually by having more diversity, it's not just a feel-good type of thing. Let's do it because we want more diversity here, because it just, on a personal level, it's rewarding. It's also just from a pure dollars and cents business perspective. It just generates more business value, which I find that, to be really compelling. And I would think most people do as well.
Yeah, it is. I mean, when you look at the statistics of it, and then you also match it with kind of thinking a little bit more deeply as to why that would be. I mean, it just all comes down to perspective. You have, two different kind of lenses, right? When you have a gender diverse leadership team of which you will base your decisions off of, you'll, kind of pivot your company. She also mentioned boards that have more women drive higher revenues than those that don't. So it's literally, it's in the numbers, right? So it's just a matter of why is that? That's the fascinating part is it's all comes down to perspective. When you have different ideas, different, like I said, lenses, that's what will help set you apart, I'd say, from, other companies.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and I wonder too, one thing I did wonder during the discussion is how much does that apply to other sorts of diversity as well? We were focused more on gender diversity, but I think I've seen similar studies, and I can't quote them because I don't remember the numbers, but I think there are similar studies that show that the same is true for different types of diversity, whether it's race or, ethnic backgrounds or socioeconomic backgrounds, just diversity in general creates similar results from what I understand, so I think it opens up a bigger conversation even outside of gender.
Absolutely. I mean, if you think about it, like, say you have one person who grew up, in a family that made a lot of money. They have, an upbringing that is in a private school, et cetera. They have that perspective, that life experience. And you have somebody who grew up, maybe in the inner city, and they have a completely different perspective. But then when you bring them both to the same table, you have those two different consumer lenses that would then also translate into, how can your company speak to those consumers and have more of that wide reach. So absolutely, it is way bigger than just gender diverse. It goes into really everything, every type of, it's, we're all one and the same, right? It just is a matter of, what's your story? And when you can bring those different stories together, that's what makes for something unique and something different.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think, even though I made the semi-flippant comment about me being the least diverse person in the workforce, one point of my background I think has been helpful, and I think it's interesting when I come up against people that don't have this sort of background is, my parents were in high school when I was born, and so I grew up fairly poor. My family didn't have much money, so everything I did in my career, I had to work for, and I know a lot of people that have to do that too. But that sort of upbringing and background and just different perspective, and then you fast forward. I went to college at a private school because I got a scholarship, and a lot of rich kids there, and it was almost like culture shock when I got there. But you just look at personal experiences like that. I think we all have those stories where there's something in your own background that's so different, and you come across people that are different. And you put that together, and it's a pretty powerful combination when you can do that.
Absolutely, it's amazing.
Yeah. Yeah, and then the other one of the other things that she mentioned that was really fascinating, almost even more fascinating than the first statistic on the performance of gender diverse leadership teams, is just the pandemic's effect on women in technology, and how the stereotype or the common assumption is that more women must have left the workforce to go stay home with the kids and homeschool them and all that stuff. But the delta really wasn't that significant. I mean, there was a little bit of a delta, but there's a lot more men than I would have thought that left the workforce during the pandemic. What were your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, it's a lot of people leaving the workforce. I mean, it's just an unfortunate time. Everyone's getting hit, right? I think that's obvious. It's how can we get everybody back into the workforce? But it's also interesting to see, because if you look at, women have come a long way in just like one generation. Like I look at my parents, and it really starts there. That's where my mom started working, right? But before that, my grandma wasn't working. Her mom wasn't working, right? So it's like such a new thing that I feel like it makes sense that there would be more women that are leaving the workforce in this situation in the pandemic, because if childcare closes, it's more often than not going to fall on the mom to stay home with the kids. So, I think that's what is kind of eye-opening in a sense. It's like we're still kind of slipping back into those, gender norms, I guess you could say, which, how do you alleviate that? We get past the pandemic, right? I think that's the first solution, is how can we beat COVID and get everybody back to work? But she mentioned a handful of other, ways that people could help keep moms, specifically like women and mothers, in the workforce so that it's not that discrepancy. And I think a lot of it really does come back to flexibility, and it's for both men and women, because there's men who are also staying home, right? I mean, 1.8 million men, that is a lot of men to leave the workforce as well. So if you're, adjusting your business operations to be a little bit more flexible, allow people to log on at 9 p.m. rather than expecting them to be on 8 to 5. Those are the things that are going to help really everybody get through the pandemic and hopefully get to the other side of it. But definitely interesting statistics for sure.
Yeah, really interesting. And then, there's some other sort of closing thoughts on what leaders can do, as far as managing these sorts of gender diverse or just diverse workforces in general. So, you talked a bit about, performance criteria, or some of the thoughts we had talked about were setting performance criteria and other. What are your thoughts there?
Right. Yeah. I mean, the whole goal is to level the playing field, right? And we all might have some unconscious bias, which, Allison spoke about. And I think that could kind of play into how you appraise your employees, regardless of their background, how you hire, et cetera. So some of the things that Allison really highlighted was set the performance criteria from the get-go. So you have this list of what the expectation is, and then you can match up all your employees to that list, rather than letting it be kind of tinted by any type of bias that there would be. Another thing is just being aware of the statistics when you're going to the table to hire somebody. Understanding that women apply to jobs where they can check all of the qualifications, 100% of the boxes, whereas men statistically apply to jobs where they only check about 60% of the boxes when it comes to qualifications. So it's interesting to just see kind of like on that psychological level, kind of how people pursue opportunities, and really, being cognizant of that as you're selecting your new hires, as you're promoting, et cetera.
Yeah. There's definitely some good leadership lessons there for sure. Well, good.
Yep.
Well, that was a great.
Stuff.
Yeah, it was great to have her on the show, and I appreciate you inviting her and having that discussion with her.
Absolutely, she rocks. She's definitely making waves, both at Dish and in the tech industry. So happy she could join us.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, good. Well, I want to thank you for hosting another great episode of Transformation Ground Control. We're going to be back next Wednesday, as we are every Wednesday, 10 a.m. Eastern Time in the United States, 3 p.m. London, or 11 p.m. Hong Kong on YouTube. You can watch us on YouTube anytime after that. You can also listen or subscribe on audio-only formats, Apple, Google, Spotify, Pandora, iHeartRadio, all that good stuff. So thanks again for listening. Thanks for being here. We'll look forward to seeing you next time. Thanks for joining Transformation Ground Control. We'll see you next time.